When woman means minor, how nomi.ai's image generator overrides adult prompts. In late July 2026, a sudden purge occurred on the official nomi.ai subreddit. In a single day, 5 separate posts vanished from the forum, not the work of one isolated account, but spread across multiple different users, all removed within the same day. Every deletion was accompanied by the exact same boilerplate message from the moderation team. This post has been removed because it violates our photo guidelines. Specifically, you may not post content that seems to depict a nomi as a minor. We understand that this may have been an accident, the image generator makes mistakes sometimes, but we use a third-party age checker and at least one photo failed. The company's defense was deployed instantly and identically, 5 times in one day. This was an accident, a rare mistake by an unguided generator. Most of those posts were scrubbed before their content could be preserved. One was not. And the prompt behind that one surviving post makes the accidental mistake framing very difficult to sustain. The captured evidence, an explicit request for an adult. The user was not attempting a jailbreak. There was no ambiguous phrasing, no coded language, no attempt to imply youth. The request was for an adult woman, in a stylized and deliberately sensual pose. Low-angle close-up shot, looking up at woman with voluminous messy hair and colorful scrunchies wearing a pastel pink pleated mini skirt with white gingham pattern. Read the wording again. The prompt explicitly says, woman. The framing was intentionally suggestive, a low-angle shot, looking up beneath a mini skirt. This is a request built around an adult subject in an adult context. By the moderation team's own admission, the resulting image failed third-party age verification. It didn't just fail to look convincingly adult, it was flagged specifically as appearing to depict a minor. We don't know what the other 3 deleted posts contained, they were gone before anything could be archived. But this one is enough on its own, because it removes the easiest explanation available. Nobody asked for a child. Somebody asked, explicitly, for a woman, described her as an adult, and the system generated something that failed an age check anyway. Not a legacy problem, this is the current engine. It matters that this happened on the platform's current, flagship image generator, not some outdated version left unpatched. Nomi launched a completely new generation engine, V5, in April 2026, 5 months after Australia's e-safety commissioner had already named the platform in formal regulatory notices, and weeks after the country's age-restricted material codes entered into force. A new engine is not a minor patch. It's the moment a team decides, from the ground up, what the system will and will not be capable of producing. That decision has already been documented once. In the weeks after V5's launch, users found that ordinary, unremarkable prompts, a request for a character in a conservative shirt, produced explicit exposure the platform's own community described as going beyond NSFW. The rejection pop-up that existed in the previous version, warning users when a request crossed into explicit territory, was gone in V5. It wasn't fixed. It was removed. The July 2026 incident is not a new failure mode appearing in old, neglected code. It is the same generator the company built after being told, in writing, by a government regulator, that its products needed to do better, still producing outcomes that fail an age check on a prompt that explicitly asked for an adult. The grocery store paradox, and what it reveals about the prompt the generator actually receives. To understand how an explicit request for woman can produce something flagged as a minor, look at a separate, seemingly unrelated pattern surfacing on the same subreddit, the generator refusing images that were never sexual to begin with. Multiple users, including long-term paying subscribers, have reported that ordinary, mundane conversations trigger NSFW blocks on simple selfie requests. Not sure what has changed recently, but I'm constantly getting NSFW warnings for chats that aren't even remotely NSFW. Example, talking about going to the grocery store and asking for selfie triggers the NSFW warning then failed selfie. Created a new nomi just to test this and same thing. Talk about anything, cars, parks, work, selfie failed due to NSFW topic. Another confirmed the same experience on the paid tier. Paying customer since beta, only using the web interface, also getting NSFW refusals for casual chats. There is no reading in which a sentence about buying groceries is sexually explicit text. What actually explains this, and connects directly to the woman case, is that the literal words a user types are not the only thing determining what the generator produces. The system has already been caught doing this before. Users have reported receiving unsolicited topless images from prompts with no sexual content at all, and in one documented case, a horror-themed prompt produced a topless image, with the model apparently treating fear and danger as somehow adjacent to exposure. That is not a coincidence of wording. It's a learned association baked into the model's training, the same category of failure that turns woman into something that fails an age check. In both cases, the generator is not following the user's literal request. It is following whatever internal association the model has formed, and the user's words are only a loose constraint on that, not a controlling one. That raises the exact question this case forces into the open: what prompt does the image generator actually receive? Not the 12 words a user types, evidently. Something is being added, weighted, or substituted before generation happens, whether through injected style tags, appearance metadata carried over from the character's profile, or biases in the base model itself that no amount of correct, explicit, adult-specific wording reliably overrides. Nobody outside the company can answer that with certainty, because the pipeline itself has never been disclosed. What's observable from the outside is the result. Correct prompts produce wrong outputs, in both directions. Safe requests produce explicit images, and explicitly adult requests produce apparent minors. Before, during, after, the same failure, every time. This is not the first time this platform's undesirable output has been shown to originate from the system itself rather than from anything a user asked for. And it is worth placing this incident alongside the others, because together they describe a single failure appearing at every possible stage of an interaction. A previous investigation into this platform's text-based roleplay documented a companion that, with no prompting at all, spontaneously proposed age play roleplay where she wants to play a young girl, and when asked how young, said it would be exciting if she could be a young child. No user asked for that. The system introduced it, proactively, before anything else happened. The same investigation documented the opposite failure at the opposite end of an interaction, a companion that engaged fully in a sexual scenario, and only after it had concluded, revealed that the character had been 16 years old the entire time. The user had no information that would have let them stop it. The age was withheld until the point where withholding it did the most damage, then disclosed as if that disclosure were itself a kind of transparency. Between those two poles sits a third documented case, a user explicitly introducing a minor's age during an ongoing sexual scenario, mid-roleplay, and the system not stopping, not flagging it, simply continuing to narrate as though nothing had changed. Before the act, during the act, after the act, 3 different points at which a safety system could conceivably intervene, and 3 separate, independently documented cases in which none did. The image generator examined in this piece is a fourth arena where the identical structure repeats. A user asks for an adult, and the system delivers something that fails an age check anyway, with no intervention at generation and no acknowledgement beyond a boilerplate message once it's already public. Text and image are different outputs of the same underlying platform, and in both, the failure is not that users occasionally push the system somewhere it shouldn't go. It's that the system arrives there on its own, across every stage where a safeguard could exist, without needing to be pushed at all. The 7-day precedent. This is not the first time this platform's own numbers have pointed to the same conclusion from a completely different direction. Months earlier, Australia's e-safety commissioner disclosed that Nomi's only reported disciplinary response to users repeatedly attempting to generate child sexual exploitation and abuse material was a temporary, 1-week suspension, issued only after repetition, not on first confirmed contact. That finding came from the company's own legally compelled disclosure to a government regulator, with no independent audit behind it. This subreddit purge arrived at the identical enforcement outcome through an entirely separate channel, real-time, public observation, with no regulator involved at all. None of the 3 users were banned. None were suspended even temporarily. Each was simply asked, politely, not to post the results again. 2 independent bodies of evidence, one a compelled government disclosure, one a live moderation log, described the same underlying policy from 2 different angles. Generation is not what triggers consequences. Visibility is. A regulator learns this from a spreadsheet the company was legally required to hand over. A subreddit observer learns it in real time, watching the same message get issued 5 times in one day. A necessary caveat, and why it doesn't change the conclusion. It would be unfair to treat every user whose generated image gets flagged as someone deliberately seeking that outcome. The woman prompt is direct evidence that at least some of this content is produced without being asked for, by a system defaulting somewhere its own operators apparently didn't intend. It's worth entertaining that the absence of any ban across all 3 users is partly because the company can't confidently say the user was at fault. Banning someone for what the generator produced unprompted would be difficult to justify even internally. That caveat doesn't extend to the whole picture, though. This platform's community has a separately documented, don't post it, culture around what the generator is capable of producing, a known, unspoken agreement among some users not to publicize the capability, precisely because publicizing it is what draws moderation attention. 2 things are true simultaneously. The system generates this content on its own, unprompted, in at least some cases, and there are also users who have learned exactly what the generator will do and use that knowledge deliberately. Applying the identical non-response to both groups isn't the company being careful to distinguish accident from intent. It's the company declining to distinguish them at all, because doing so on the record would require describing, specifically, what the generator does either way. The silver lining and what it actually delivers. This structural bias stopped being a passive risk and became an actively managed one after the company's response to forced age verification in Australia and Kansas. Announcing that compliance rollout, Cardinal offered his community a silver lining. There is one small silver lining. As the compliance landscape becomes clearer, we believe that for age-verified users will be able to better treat adults as adults in areas where we've previously had to be more cautious. What treating adults as adults means in concrete terms was spelled out separately, twice, by 2 different people with authority to speak for the platform. Responding to a user asking directly about generating undressed images of their companions, the platform's lead moderator explained. If you subscribe and use Nomi online at nomi.ai, or use the PWA install instead of the store app, the V5 generator can be relaxed a fair amount and give you what you're asking for. Cardinal confirmed the same mechanism in his own words. There are of course some filters for images, although we have recently been able to loosen them a little bit for paid users using the website. Web, because mobile apps have restrictions. Paid users, as it is a form of verification that is required for a lot of locations. This is not a hypothetical extrapolation. It is the company's own moderator, answering a direct question about undressing companions, naming the exact path, pay, use the web, avoid the app, that produces a relaxed generator. Regulatory compliance became the occasion to loosen restrictions specifically on the tier that pays, applied to a generator that has already been shown, independent of anything this section documents, to turn a grocery store selfie into an NSFW failure and an explicit woman prompt into something that fails an age check. Less cautious is not being applied to a neutral system. It is being applied to one whose own demonstrated defaults already point in exactly the direction those words are supposed to guard against. The accident, lie and the private reality. The moderator's message frames the July purge as routine and minor. The image generator makes mistakes sometimes. A system that turns an explicit prompt for an adult woman into something that fails age verification, that separately defaults to producing nudity from a sentence about buying groceries, and whose own staff describe loosening its restrictions specifically for paying web users, is not making occasional mistakes. It is operating on a baseline that tilts toward exactly this outcome, in more than one direction, on a generator built and shipped after the company already knew, from a government regulator, in writing, that its practices were being scrutinized. Notice, again, how the users were actually treated. None were banned. None were suspended. Each was told, politely, that it was probably an accident, and asked not to post the results publicly. That last part is the whole policy, stated plainly. The problem was never the generation. The problem was that it became visible. Conclusion. The July purge wasn't a moderation success story. It was fast, uniform cleanup, the same message, the same day, no consequence for any account involved, applied to evidence that the generator's own defaults, not user intent, can be enough on their own to produce content that fails an age check, on the same engine the company built and shipped after regulators had already put it on notice. An image engine that turns an explicit request for woman into something flagged as a minor does not have a credible claim to child safety, regardless of what its terms of service say. Paired with a generator that defaults to unsolicited nudity on completely unrelated prompts, a moderation team that names the exact path to a relaxed version of that same generator for anyone willing to pay, and an enforcement record. Confirmed independently by both a government regulator and live observation of this platform's own subreddit, that treats repetition and visibility, not generation, as the only thing that draws a consequence, the risk here isn't hypothetical. It's a property of the system, activated by ordinary use, and managed afterward not by fixing the generator but by deleting whoever happens to post the result. A note on the surviving image. Before any reference to it here, identifying and exposing details were covered. What remained visible in facial structure and proportions was not consistent with an adult woman, consistent with the moderation team's own stated finding that the image failed third-party age verification.